Hey everybody, I wanted to do another video on Norumbega. I saw that you guys, had some really awesome comments and you brought up some good points. And there's been other videos where we've kind of talked about some things that kind of conflict with what was presented in the last video, so I wanted to bring that up and go through some new info. So we're going to go ahead and start off with David Ingram. And the idea is this is the first of many, he's the first explorer to basically go from Mexico to Nova Scotia. He's this English sailor. And Nova Scotia, this is going to be one of the interesting little details that we're going to see, these references to Scotland and Irish, Gaelic type names. We're going to see more of that as we move forward. But I want to go ahead and get a big shout out to Deciphering the Devil's Details. I watched this video and he has a lot of things in here that I didn't mention, and I thought it would be really cool to kind of tie them together with other things that we've said. So yeah, David Ingram, right? So this is an interesting thing because he's basically, right, like I said, the first explorer, and he gives us an account of the natives that were in this land, and he's references Norumbega and stuff like that. So as I mentioned, I think there's a couple things going on here because what he encountered in the Americas is a little questionable, because at the top here it mentions elephants, and I don't know what time period they're talking about, or if they're just trying to make this more fantastical to kind of sell it, you know what I mean? So the weird thing is that Ingram is basically saying that he found these Native Americans that were type like savages in a way, like the common story that we've mentioned in other videos, where you have these people inhabiting these great leftover ruins of cities and stuff like that. And he says that they have pearls and crystals and all sorts of stuff, gold. And this is also similar with what we hear with Calafia and the legends of kind of the Moors. We have this kind of similarity of this fantastical element. So we have multiple legends that are kind of referring to these things. But yeah, he's basically saying that they were cannibals. And here it says, when they came before and dwelt in a country called Gezica, who caused them to strip naked and wondering greatly at their whiteness. So these natives were, or at least the ones that Ingram are talking about, were of a darker complexion. He talks about all sorts of stuff, like they have dog teeth and all this stuff. So it brings us to the next section. Here they give us this history of South Carolina, which I should mention, we don't really have Ingram's account. All we have is the translation, which is what makes it kind of weird because, well, first, if he's here describing major cities and all this stuff, I mean, they're probably going to be like, oh, well, I don't know if we should say that, or we should cover that up in a certain way. But another aspect to this is that somewhere in here, it says that he's illiterate. He's religious, so I think he can write, but for some reason, they're saying he was illiterate, that he had to explain this to someone else and then they translated it, which is a little strange. But if we go ahead and go to his account that's from someone else, he basically says that there's cannibals here. First he says that the people in those countries are the enemies to the cannibals or the man-eaters, and he's talking about Norumbega right here. But then he also comes to mention that they have dog teeth. So where was that? The cannibals inhabit between Norumbega and Barrenshire. They have teeth like dogs, and thereby you may know them. So I might as well go ahead and mention, so the two theories are this, right? Let's just say that this is true. Let's just say that what he's presenting right now is kind of what he saw, and they don't really mention this anymore because it's a cover-up. Well, that idea would say that, okay, there were cannibals, and we mentioned this in our Tartaria Explained Part 3 series. It goes over a lot of different things in here, but for the most part, you have this story that these savages and these cannibals are what the Europeans encountered when they got here. So I think what's happening here with that theory is that what if there was an ancient civilization that was in the Americas. Call this the Irish or the Hebrews, like the Mormons mentioned, and even the Moors from Calafia, right, with the Montalvo legends from Spain. So there was an advanced civilization here, but then something happened, some type of catastrophe, right? Or maybe the sun disappeared, and they had to retreat into caves. And I mean, think about what this would do to your mind. So that's how I think these cannibals would come about, even with, I don't think that's just how they've always been, you know what I mean? Because as they're mentioning in here, their buildings are weak of small force. So they say that, right? But then they go and to talk about how there's these banquet halls and these pillars of massive silver and crystal framed square. And I know somewhere else in here is also mentioning lanterns. So this is not just some savage. These people are inhabiting some type of ruins or some type of leftover architecture. So to tie this together with Tartaria Explained Part 3 and other things, there's this old newspaper, and I've mentioned this in other videos, where they found Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. And I think it's the Hopi legends that talk about this stuff about the sun disappearing, going into caves, and these ant people too, a whole bunch of weird stuff. But yeah, they've found artifacts, and even a lot of the formations in the Grand Canyon are in reference to Egyptian names like the Isis pyramid and stuff like that. So another aspect to this is all these Irish connections in terms of some kind of Irish culture in America. And I think I need to clarify, because I keep saying Tartaria, and I see people saying like, oh, Tartars, they were this and this and that. Well, what we've kind of researched, and like we've mentioned in our first video, our first video for Tartaria Explained, we connect the Irish with Tartaria, and this idea that, this global culture where you had all this similarity in European architecture, and you see it in the same in the Americas. And what if the same culture that created all these architectures in Europe and even Russia and all sorts of different places were the same people who kind of came about with the Magna Carta? And I was talking about this in the last video, but I didn't bring this up. I think this kind of ties it all together, that what if these people, the first kind of document that we have where the people are given the power and kind of have more have individual rights. And so the people that came up with this document could very well have came over to America and have shared the same principles. Now, whether they created the Constitution or not, that goes back to the two theories that I was saying. Was there a great cataclysm? And so there was, there was a break for a little bit, 100 years or 200 years where, they became savages, if you believe the story that you get from Britain and, these Phoenician Jesuits, where we get this false history and this false propaganda of savage cannibals. Now, if you believe that, then there has to be a time period from the Cataclysm of when, they basically had their downfall. Now, it's either that or they just came over to America and they were there until 1812, and they passed this on with the Constitution. Now, whether they passed it on or whoever came and conquered, there formed some type of secret society that aimed to try to protect these fundamental ideas, and kind of left it to us. I saw there's a really good comment in the last video that I pinned that kind of ties that thought stream together. But it's this idea that there is not just these rulist or these elite kind of secret societies that want to just like suppress history and govern everything, but there's these secret societies that also want to abide by some kind of karmic outcome, where they want it to be fair, so that we have an opportunity to claim our own knowledge, our own rights, our own sovereignty. So, and then it just became a responsibility of the people. Were we going to stand for this? And so that's what I was kind of bringing up in the last video in terms of the Constitution and whether or not this might be from some kind of past advanced civilization. And I think there's a lot of connections here. And so one of the weird things, you know, they have Nova Scotia, and then they have this Nova Albion, which is a little bit of a strange story. And you're going to see this common theme where you're going to see native savages as they come in here, or you see these Moorish. In the earliest ones, you see a lot of Moorish type natives. So I find that interesting as well. But this Francis Drake character, right? He's an interesting guy. We'll go over that in a second. But Albion is the old name for Great Britain. It's a Gaelic reference to the old world. So I find that a little bit strange that they would have all these names in the old maps for Ireland and other Gaelic cultures. So yeah, Sir Francis Drake, let's see where he is. Here he is. This guy was just one of these elitists. The Hidden Knight. And then you have Phoenician heraldry. So I think this is some kind of cover-up in terms of, you know, they also have a lot of references with I think it's Hernan Cortez, where he's basically in the Mexico in southern Baja California, and he's describing like Montalvo's legends, this idea of crystal castles and all this stuff on the west coast. And that's in Tartaria Explained at some point in here. I'd have to get it ready for you guys. But yeah, and another reference too is Kukulkan, which he is the feathered serpent, or the god of the Mayan religion. It is said that he had a human form that closely matches the description of a tall Caucasian, white-skinned, blue eyes with blonde or silver hair. The similarity led to the European invaders being initially greeted as gods. And so, let me see, I had this up with Mexico City. So then we have this history of Mexico City, which, again, with Hernan Cortez, there's some fishy stuff going on here. So all over Mexico, you have these strange, just the same architecture that just doesn't fit with the narrative that they give us. So again, was there a civilization in the Americas? And was there some kind of cataclysm? Or the other theory is, were they in the Americas until the 1812, and that's when the Great War happened, and they had to go through the fight. But the weird thing about that is, you would think if they were so advanced that they would be able to win the war. So I tend to lean that something big happened, some big type of cataclysm or something happened where either one, they disappeared, or the theory with the cannibals, right? So we have this other reference, which is one of the first kind of books to describe the New World. And again, here you have these kind of Indians, dark colored as well. And this is the story that they tell us with Norumbega. Like, if we're to look up the first books that talk about Norumbega, this is what they describe. They describe savages that are dark skinned, that were basically cannibals, that had all this fancy stuff. Pearls, gold, and all this stuff. But they don't really describe how they got all that. And you know, a lot of things like these massive palaces and castles that are depicted. So instead of reading from here, and yeah, you have this old map referencing Nova Albion, and California is still an island. And you know what I don't get, which I didn't mention when I was talking about Albion, is Point Reyes. What is this called? Or Reyes or whatever. You would think if they made it all the way out there that they would know that this isn't an island. So something else is going on here. But again, you know, you have these Phoenician cover-ups trying to suppress this history. So instead of reading this from here, there is a translation, or not a translation, but just a little bit easier to read. And please forgive me if I butcher some of these, but Norumbega, lying between Nova Scotia northward and New England southward, is so utterly not taken notice of by many as a distinct province, that it might seem to be swallowed up and lost in 2 countries between which it lies, or at least to be thought of a part of Virginia or New England. Going over here, as for towns or cities of this province, there is but a very uncertain account to be given, for as much as the pretended great city Norumbega, from whence the province should take its appellation, is not acknowledged by any of the most authentic modern writers, nor in any late voyage or discovery any mention made either of that or any other considerable town or city. Dr. Halen supposeth it to be no other than Aguncia, a poor little village that seems composed of a company of huts or sheaves, covered with skins or beast or the bark of trees. Which goes back to what I was talking about, where, they're just trying to cover this up. It was just savages, natives, they weren't that advanced. But we continue. But the most favorable conjecture is that it might happily be the ruins of an ancient town, which the natives called Norumbega, and had probably deserted it long before the arrival of the Europeans in those parts. However, it is not very probable that the name of the country should be derived from this city, if ever there were any such, or from that river, which appears to have been termed Norumbega on purpose to make way for this derivation, whereas Pomtegavit is the ancient appellation that properly belongs to it. Now the next part that I wanted to go over is where he's talking about its connection to Norway. As for those who will have Norumbega derived from Norwegia in respect of a colony brought thither from Norway, if the etymology be not a little too much forced, the invention may pass well enough till a better be found out. And so this is going to bring us to this next kind of puzzle piece, where the whole legend of Norumbega is about Leif Erikson coming and colonizing America way before Columbus. So I found this interesting book. Long before the time of Cobbett, Cartier, Roberval, Champlain, and Hudson, Canada was known in Norse tradition, and it is claimed that the Basque and the Breton fishermen caught cod on the Grand Banks a century before Columbus's day. Canada was the first part of America to be discovered, and Bjarne Herjolfsson, son of an Icelander who had moved to Greenland, reached Cape Breton in the year 986, while trying to join his father in the new home. 14 years later, Leif Erikson, son of the Icelandic Jarl, Eric the Red, tried to find this new land. It is not known exactly where he went ashore, but the Labrador was first sighted, Helluland, he called it, a country of no advantages. Somewhere possibly on the Penobscot was the city of crystal and silver, Norumbega, and maybe Arumbega, Arumbek, and Lorumbek. So he's giving a bunch of different names that this must be called, and it goes back to what I was saying about these ancient civilizations that might have been in America, is that we're just getting the names of what was renamed of what was renamed. I mean, these things have been covered up probably like 3 times already. So, it begs the question, like, we don't even know what it was originally called at this point. But let's go over this guy, because this is an interesting detail. So Bjarne Herjolfsson was a Norse Icelandic explorer who's believed to be the first known European discoverer of the mainland of the Americas. Okay? And then you have the connection with Leif Erikson, right? And we've all heard of this, right? But it's just like, they don't really talk about it in scientific circles or anything, or history class, but for the most part, we know about this legend. So what I find interesting, right? So what it's basically saying is that Bjarne Herjolfsson had moved to Greenland. And just think about this for 1 second. So they could easily just come from Norway to Iceland to Greenland and to Canada, right? Why is that such a crazy idea? Well, the reason why is because Greenland was thought to be not inhabitable. So that goes back to what I was saying about the missing sun. That was there a time where Greenland was actually green? And in legends, that's what they say, that there wasn't always ice there, but that's not really accepted in mainstream circles. So I don't think it's crazy that, and not only for Norway. I mean, when I'm talking about this culture, I think it was all of Europe. When I'm talking about Tartaria or the Irish or whatever they were called. But for the most part, you have this culture which has this similar architecture all around the world. And I think it's it's just like they were saying in the book, where the Basque and the Norse were finding their way into America. And you have multiple references of this. I go over that in Ancient Deforestation. I talk about Ohm, which is this ancient language that has been basically erased. Because if you go look it up right now, they just say it's from like, you know, the past like 1,000 years. It's not even considered like an ancient language, but I think this is a cover up. And in this video, I talk about this news article or this news report from 1987 that talks about Ohm in America, in Colorado. But the argument is that it's on a flat kind of rock in Ohm, or Ogum as some people know it, is usually kind of on tall rocks. It's kind of like vertical, but this guy has a video kind of debunking that claim. So, and there's also in this video, I talk about round towers, Irish round towers that were all over the Americas. Here it is. So these round towers, which again looks a lot similar to what Norumbega Tower, and I covered this in the last video, but I think I missed a couple things. I didn't get the big part of this, which Devil's Details kind of helped me out with. So this guy, Eben Norton Horsfield, supposedly erected this. That's the story. He erected this as a tribute to Leif Erikson because he believed in Norumbega and he was trying to prove it, and he just never succeeded, you know? He just kind of died, and that was the end of it. So that's the story that we're left with. But I think that's just a cover-up. I think this is literally probably all we have left of Norumbega. That's it. And the weird part about this is that this guy, right, Eben Norton Horsford, he claimed that the mouth of the Stony Brook was the location of the supposed Norse city Norumbega. So you have this tributary, which is this artificial pond, and there's 3 of them that were all artificial, and it's around the same time around this guy erecting this tower and stuff. And so what if they literally just flooded the remains? And I'm sure there's multiple ways to get rid of these, you know, these ancient ruins. I'm sure they got a system going on where either they burn it or whatever, but maybe in this case it was a little bit more difficult than that. So they were just like, you know what, forget about it, let's just flood it. And there's also legends about that in the Great Lakes, I think. I'll have to do another video on that, but they talk about like obelisk or different underground ruins, or sorry, underwater ruins in the lakes. So yeah, I found that interesting. I thought that this might be some type of cover-up, I guess. And so we'll finish up here, but I don't think the Irish were the only ones in America. I think there was multiple races. And as we have with the Montalvo novels, you know, you hear all sorts of fantastical stuff on the West, with California. So, you know, you have these advanced, psychic, powerful female Moors in the Americas with all these, you know, griffins and all sorts of things. So I don't think that there's just one easy kind of answer to kind of coming to like exactly what happened. But for the most part, we can conclude that there was some kind of advanced culture in the Americas. You see it with the Native American legends, with they describe these advanced races of giants that had electric technology. They have the legends of red-haired giants, but usually a lot of those are kind of like they're cannibals or savages, which again goes back to the Cataclysm theory. But I don't know, I think it's obvious that a lot of the architecture that we have all around Americas, the narrative that they're giving us is just not enough, and it's obvious that there's something else going on. And so a lot of these references and these legends have just kind of been forgotten over time, because that's the cover-up, is that they turned these stories into just legends, and then we were given the official narrative. So yeah, that's a lot of my thoughts kind of compiled into one, but you know, another thing is that they talk about a great river. So it could be that Norumbega is in a different location. We don't know for sure. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. like, subscribe, make sure that notification bell's on, and we have a lot more videos coming. And just let me know your thoughts in the comments, okay? Like, you guys really help me out with deciding what I'm gonna do for the next video. So, you know, all I can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?